A town lost 130 children without a trace. A woman clawed her way out of her own grave after being buried alive. Man-eating beasts and abandoned underground cities, these are European urban legends that turned out to be terrifyingly real. Most people know this as a fairy tale. A piper gets hired to clear a town of rats, the town refuses to pay him, and he gets revenge by playing his flute and leading all the children away. But on June 26, 1284, 130 children actually vanished from a real town called Hamelin in Germany. The town was so destroyed by this that they actually started measuring time from that day forward. Their official records would say things like 100 years since our children left. That was how badly it wrecked them. Now, when historians went back and looked at the oldest written accounts, the rats weren't mentioned. That rat story got added on later. The original records are just about the kids disappearing. Now, what probably happened is that a recruiter showed up in town, someone outgoing, persuasive, wearing bright, flashy clothes, which is how recruiters dressed back then to stand out. And they would have talked the town's young people into leaving. Times were hard, and these recruiters, called locators, would go from town to town promising land or work in places like Eastern Europe or Transylvania. Young people followed him out, and they would have never come back. That's the theory, anyway. You probably heard some version of this one. A woman gets buried wearing a valuable ring. That night, grave robbers dig her up to sell it. When they try to cut the ring off her swollen finger, the pain wakes her up. Turns out she wasn't dead, just in a coma. Well, that actually happened. Her name was Marjorie McCall, and it was 1705 in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. She got very sick, was declared dead, and was quickly buried to stop whatever illness she had from spreading to the rest of town. That same night, grave robbers came for her wedding ring. When they cut her finger to try and get it off, the pain snapped her out of it. She climbed out of the grave herself, walked all the way back home, and knocked on her own front door in the middle of the night. Her husband, who thought that she was dead, reportedly fainted on the spot when he opened the door. She lived for years after that, though, and if you go to Shankill Cemetery today, her gravestone is still there, which reads, Marjorie McCall, lived once, buried twice. If someone told you there was a creature made up of a dozen rats physically fused together into one giant writhing mass, you'd probably assume it was some old medieval legend. Well, for centuries, people across Germany and other parts of Europe told stories about something called a rat king, a group of rats whose tails had become tangled together into a single knot. According to the legend, the animals were permanently trapped, forced to move and survive as this one creature. It sounded pretty bizarre. Most people wrote it off as pure folklore, but this is actually a thing, as revolting as it sounds. One of the most famous was discovered in Germany in 1828. Consisted of 32 black rats whose tails were bound together in a large knot. Other Rat King specimens have been found over the years as well. Some are still preserved in museums today. The legend is a giant wolf, basically indestructible, stalks the forests of France, hunting people. Doesn't go for livestock, it specifically targets humans. Basically, it's a werewolf. The real version isn't far off. Between 1764 and 1767, something was killing people in a region of southern France called Gévaudan, mostly women and children. The death toll climbed to somewhere around 100. Got so bad that King Louis XV personally sent in royal troops and hired professional hunters to deal with the thing. In 1767, a man named Jean Chastel shot and killed a large animal. When they opened its stomach, they found human remains inside. Modern zoologists think it was probably an abnormally large wolf-dog hybrid, possibly something like a hyena that had escaped from a traveling animal show. Whatever it actually was, it was real, it was big, and it had been eating people for 3 years before it was finally put down. The legend says that during plague outbreaks, city officials in Edinburgh, Scotland, walled up entire alleyways with sick people still inside, leaving them to die in the dark. The walling up story is exaggerated, but what's actually under Edinburgh is real. Beneath the streets, there's a completely intact 17th century neighborhood called Mary King's Close. When the city decided to build something called the Royal Exchange in the 1700s, they didn't demolish the old buildings that were in the way. Instead, they just cut the tops off the houses and built the new structure directly on top of them. The old streets became the foundation. The whole neighborhood ended up sealed underground, this dark maze of rooms and alleyways sitting under the city. Those streets were already badly hit by the plague of 1645. The city didn't trap people alive down there on purpose, but it did quarantine the abandoned lower levels during the outbreak, and then later just built over the top of everything. It's open to tourists today. Sticking with Scotland, since the 70s, kids in Greenock would tell stories about a half-man, half-cat creature with glowing eyes and pure black skin that hid under cars and in bushes at night, catching rats and eating them raw. The story said he lived among a pack of wild cats, looked after them, and at some point stopped thinking of himself as a person. Now, where it actually came from, supposedly, is a really sad story. Catman was originally a Russian sailor who jumped ship at Greenock Harbor in the 70s, apparently because of mental health problems, and he had conflicts with the rest of the crew. He ended up stranded, begging on the streets. At some point, a group of local teens found him and beat him so badly that he broke both his legs and his jaw. He couldn't walk upright again, and the damage to his jaw left him unable to speak properly. He refused to go to hospitals or shelters though, wouldn't let anyone help him, and ended up just living on the street, dragging himself along on his stomach. He slept under parked cars and buses for warmth, and from crawling around under vehicles constantly, his skin and clothes became completely black with motor oil. There have been lots of photos shared online that are supposedly real sightings of him. Some are probably dudes cosplaying, but locals have said they've seen the guy in real life. Next up, we have the legend of the Black Volga. The legend spread all across Poland, Romania, and Czechoslovakia during the Cold War. A sleek black Volga car with white rims and curtained windows cruises the streets of cities like Warsaw and Prague at night. The driver, depending on who's telling it, either is a vampire, a Satanist, or just straight up the devil, rolls down the window and asks someone for the time, and then they're gone. Some stories went that the victim's organs were being harvested. Pretty insane story. How could there be any truth to this? Well, the Gaz-21 Volga was an extremely expensive car in the Soviet bloc. Basically, no ordinary person could own one. They were handed out almost exclusively to senior Communist Party members and the secret police, the KGB. And those exact black cars really did pull up to the curb in the middle of the night and take people. People who said the wrong thing to the wrong person. People someone powerful wanted gone. They'd be bundled into one of those cars and vanish into the prison system, and that would be the last anyone heard of them. At some point, the real story mutated into a ghost story about vampires and organ harvesting, probably because talking openly about what those black cars actually meant could get you put inside one. The supernatural version was just safer to repeat. The story goes there's some hidden city buried in the Italian mountains where thousands of people live in ancient caves completely cut off from the modern world. It wasn't a legend. Matera is a city in southern Italy. It's one of the oldest places on the planet. People have been continuously living it. People there didn't just live near caves, they carved their homes directly into the cliffs. And families have been doing that for thousands of years. By the 30s and 40s, the Italian government found that over 15,000 people were living in those caves, but it wasn't ideal. They had no electricity, no running water, no ventilation. Infant mortality was also high because livestock were living in the caves too, and disease just easily spread. In 1952, the prime minister at the time called Matera a national shame. The government moved everyone out of the caves and into proper housing. The cave city sat completely empty for decades after that, and now it's a tourist destination. This next story goes that a man films his exploration of the forbidden, unmapped sections of the Paris catacombs, gets completely turned around, starts panicking, drops the camera, and runs off into the dark. In 2005, a group of urban explorers found an abandoned camera sitting in a remote tunnel deep in the system. The footage on it is basically the story I just told you. A man filming himself moving through tight, flooded passages. And the moment he realizes that he has no idea where he is, his breathing changes, he starts moving faster, more erratically, then runs, turns corners into total darkness, the camera hits the ground, and he doesn't come back for it. French authorities were never able to figure out who the man was, and there's still no definitive answer as to whether the guy made it out alive or if the video's even real. I mean, it exists, but people say it could have been staged. What is absolutely true, though, is that people do get lost in the catacombs, and some never make it out alive. The forbidden sections of the catacombs are patrolled as heavily as they are because people get lost and die in there fairly frequently. The tunnel system runs for about 200 miles under Paris, and a huge portion of it has never been properly mapped. It's said there are people living in the abandoned sections of the London Underground, descendants of Victorian-era construction workers who got trapped during the building of the tunnels and never made it out. He supposedly survived down there for generations by hunting rats and grabbing the occasional late-night commuter. Now, obviously, this is quite an exaggeration, but the real history is genuinely strange. During the Blitz in World War II, massive numbers of Londoners had to shelter in the tube stations every single night to survive the bombing. When the war ended, not everyone went back up. Some people had no home to go back to, so they stayed in the deep tunnels and the closed-off platforms. These people learned the tunnel system completely and survived on food scraps that fell onto the tracks. I'm sure some went up for food, but then would just come back down to live down there. Maintenance workers doing overnight shifts would come around a corner and just run straight into someone who'd been living down there for years. Nobody knew exactly how many people were doing it or how long some of them had been underground, but people sheltering underground in the subway is not unheard of. That has been the video for today, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.